Hi, everyone. It's so good to see you on at least a sunny afternoon here in the southern part of the country. We're so excited to have you for today's webinar with Opera NexGen. We have some people continuing to join, and so we will allow them in when they pop up. But I'd like to start by doing some introductions. First of all, this panel discussion is being recorded and will be available on Opera NexGen's website. Before we begin, I do want to give a warning that there will be discussion about diet, possibly eating disorders, fat shaming, and other forms of abuse. And so if you are highly sensitive to these topics, we just want you to be aware to make sure that you feel safe. I'm Dr. Amber James, and I'm the Director of Education and Outreach for Opera NexGen. A little bit about our company. Our mission is to provide unparalleled operatic performances with a diverse artistic community. We seek to discover the next generation of talent with our company founded on equality, equity, inclusivity, and excellence. It is our aim to cast solely on vocal ability above all other credentials. Our goal is to ensure that opera will continue to thrive for generations to come and pioneering the scope of live virtual performance. So I would like to introduce our three panelists. We're going to start with Tracy Cox, who is a soprano and fat politics artist activist. She has won many competitions and awards and has sung with orchestras around the world. She has also competed as a Grand National finalist in the Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions and regularly covers roles at the Mets. Her Instagram handle is Sparkle Jams, and she has 16,000 followers, and she centers on fat liberation, fat vanity, and fat talent in the performing arts. She's also sought after as a speaker and consultant on this topic and holds a bachelor's and master's degree from UCLA and has also completed fellowships such as Wolf Trap Opera and Music Academy of the West. Bass Matthew Anchel has also competed as a grand finalist in the 2013 Metropolitan Opera National Council auditions. Most recently, he has been in the ensemble with Oper Stuttgart. He has just completed his fourth year on the Metropolitan Opera roster and has also performed with other opera companies such as LA Opera, Santa Fe, Oper Leipzig, Opera Theater of St. Louis, the Spoleto Festival, Carnegie Hall, and others. His TikTok has 850,000 followers, and he works with Tracy Cox on their web series called Angry Fat People. And our third panelist is Suli Inirio. She is an Afro-Dominican soprano and has appeared as a soloist throughout the US and Europe. She has also performed Jake Hagee's Natural Selection, where she was able to work directly with the composer. Most recently, she has sung the role of the High Priestess and covered the title role in Verdi's Aida in Sicily, Italy. She also holds a doctorate of musical arts and a minor in 19th century French literature. Thank you, three panelists, for being here. In the chat box, I'm going to include their Venmo names. If you guys feel like you would like to donate for their expertise and their time today, that would be wonderful. Please keep your microphone muted unless speaking, and feel free to include any of your own questions in the chat. Again, in advance, thank you for being respectful to our panelists and to this important topic. So here we go. I would like to start with asking our panelists to answer this question. Have you seen change this past year as issues of discrimination and hate towards all groups of people have been covered more by the media? And if so, how can we build off this surge in coverage and call to activism within our own industry? Who would like to start?
I can start. I'm not shy. Um, I think that it's fair to say that we have seen change in public sentiment around a number of issues around policing specifically, around other issues of equity. I think that although personally I think that we've seen changes in public sentiment, we haven't necessarily seen action. I think more people are feel some sense of urgency, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the bridge between that urgency and attention has moved to tangible action.
Suli?
I agree with that. There is a sense of awareness of some issues that have been happening for a very long time, and that there's a sort of cycle of awareness that happens within like the mainstream media. So we had what happened last year with the murder of George Floyd. Everybody was all fired up. Then it kind of died down, and then it's now picking up again. And there needs to be intentional action every day to dismantle these systems. It can't just rely on Black trauma happening to remind you, hey, that these things are happening. Because for someone like me to see people really fired up about things and then kind of die down and, wanting to go back to brunch, and then something happens again, it's like, oh, okay, now you care again. This is my everyday life. This is the everyday life of people that are affected directly by this. So if there's intentional action every day that doesn't rely on having to witness Black trauma and pain, that would be better.
I completely agree with the ladies. It'll be interesting to see when things start to reopen if people actually put their money where their mouth is and follow through on the things that they have been like, oh yes, we hear you, we see, and that goes not for the issues that we're talking about today with body stuff, it also with race and sexuality, all these things that are people are discussing. So I'll be very interested to see if people follow through on the things that they're talking about, and I hope they do. Wouldn't that be nice? I'm I'm a little bit of a pessimist, but I think the more that we talk about this stuff and the more we bring it to the forefront, the more likely it is that people will follow through and give people opportunities that they deserve.
That's great. So recently, two articles were released by middle class artists specifically related to our topic today. Tracy, would you summarize these articles and tell us if the Metropolitan Opera or any other opera company has responded in support of these performers?
Absolutely. So the original article was an investigative piece by Zach Finkelstein on his blog, The Middle Class Artist, and it was motivated by specific incidents from this year's Metropolitan Opera National Council competition, in which one of the judges, Diane Zola, repeatedly gave some feedback that involved fat shaming abuse. And so a kind of amazing thing that happened from that was that two of the singers who experienced that actually reported it to HR at the Met with a formal complaint. And then Zach got a number of singers to go on the record to also kind of testify to their abuse. So I provided some context for that article, and then I followed up with an op-ed about it. And I thank you for asking the question of whether or not the Met has responded, because the Met has not said a single thing, and neither has any other company. And this is kind of the thing that I keep returning to. And one of the reasons I really thank you for centering this conversation, especially at this moment, is that we're not even far enough along in this conversation for fat people to
You want to
be
go ahead and take your shower?
demanding equity. We're just at the point where singers are asking to stop the trauma. We are testifying to trauma that we have experienced, and we're asking for it to be acknowledged and for it to stop. And the bar is so low, and they still cannot manage to meet it in any way. So I find that to be pretty frustrating, because I think that that's unique to the fat experience, in that our trauma isn't even acknowledged by these companies.
Matthew, would you like to build off that?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've seen some other instances this year of people in sort of being called out for different forms of abuse and having immediate action taken, and people having to issue apologies or lose their jobs or all of those kind of things. And it is very interesting that for this specific issue, that none of that is happening. It's and like Tracy said, the bar is so low. Like even an acknowledgement would have been sort of nice, but the fact that that isn't happening, and there are no consequences, and I would suspect that a lot of the conversation that's happening with people in the industry that are maybe a little nervous about this conversation happening in these articles, they're probably saying, well, we're just trying to help them. Like, this is just the standard of the industry. Like, they're probably very defensive and don't see it as a threat to them and like their integrity at all. So I think that is upsetting and discouraging. But I think the more we talk about it and the more we do things like this, and I mean, Tracy, she is doing so much and she's so visible and she's really like putting herself on the line to talk about this stuff. So I mean, I'm always telling her this privately, but I mean, she's really doing a lot to make this conversation keep going, because there aren't that many people, just because of the nature of all this stuff. There's a lot of shame, and there's a lot of people who maybe sometimes feel they're on board with this topic, and then maybe they'll be like, well, actually, no, I changed my mind. This agent told me I have to lose weight, so I have to do this. So Tracy's consistent, and I mean, she's really, like, I hate to sort of, I know that sometimes we say this word too much, but she's really a hero in many ways. So those are my thoughts on that.
Just to build off of that, one question I had specifically for Tracy and Matthew, as being on the Metropolitan Opera rosters, if you have experienced any type of blowback or support on either side for being vocal in this area, or is it, it's been a pandemic year, so things have been slow?
Yeah, I mean, I've also been incredibly lucky that my time at the Met, I have only had positive experiences. I think that's really due to the fact that I'm a man. I think women are much more targeted as far as body shaming and fat shaming and everything. Something I was thinking about before this panel was that I think as a man, especially as for my voice type, I'm often told, they're like, well, you're too fat to do this, but there is a place for you in this industry. Like, you can play an old guy, you can play a monster, you can play an ogre. And those are options for me. So when I'm having this conversation with people, not like, you can't be on stage because of your body. And I think women are so much more on the receiving end of that than men are. And I mean, I know so many male opera singers who are fat, plus size, whatever you want to say, and they don't have the same kind of, they don't have to deal with the same kind of things because of their gender. So I mean, today coming into any conversation like this, I recognize my privilege in that way, and I really want to try and listen a lot today too, because I'm not a woman in the industry going through these things. But yeah, so for me, it hasn't been. I don't have these feelings about it just because I haven't experienced that, and I only have support for my friends who are going through it and have experienced it.
Yeah, Tracy?
Yeah, no one from the Met has reached out to me, and I have had a number of administrators reach out to me, which is kind of an ongoing thing. There's some administrators that have hired me to consult, for them privately and say, how do I help me with the language on how I push back on fat phobia in a casting meeting, stuff like that, which is great and encouraging. But none of them are putting anything on the line publicly they're not using any of their actual kind of leverage for fat people, which is discouraging. I've also had administrators reach out which is kind of funny, and I understand, with the wanting to kind of me to release them from guilt. Like, I hope I never did this to you, etc. And it's complicated because many of those mentors, I cherish them. They taught me so many important things about how to be an excellent performer. But they also did harm to me when it comes to my body and my mental health and my physical health. And I think that we can actually talk about this there's nuance to all of this. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Suli, what about your experiences?
I thank you, Tracy, for saying the word nuance, because that's exactly where I wanted to go with this conversation. I wanted to specifically talk about different intersections of oppression, right? So, being a fat Black woman, I have a totally different experience, right? Because I'm fat and I'm Black, right? So, fat phobia is rooted in racism. It's just another way to other people of color, right? So, when I was in Europe doing auditions, and I'm saying, okay, I'm obviously knowing people tell me I can sing really well. They really like my voice, but they don't want to cast me. I'm like, obviously it's because, I'm fat, because I'm Black. They're like, no, well, so-and-so is working and they're fat. And they're pointing out to fat white opera singers. And what they're not realizing is that my Blackness is also part of this whole package that is another barrier for me, right? Because there's also almost like a unsaid cap of how many people of color can be in opera, and that's something else that we're facing. So when we have this conversation about fat phobia, for me specifically, I can't divorce it from the fact that I'm a Black woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, here's a question and just a couple of ideas that I came up with when I was reading the 2 articles from the Middle Class Artist. Do you see the importance placed on the perfect fit ideal singer in the industry as a reason why opera is dying across the country? And to build off that question, is the elitism of the industry finally falling out of place with America's changing ideals? And this is a long question. How can the top brass in A-level opera houses reach out to all demographics to begin to foster a new relationship with opera's future patrons?
Right. Well, I think that question really speaks to what we're talking about when we're talking about opera dying, right? Like, we've been talking about opera dying for hundreds of years now. And I think specifically in the moment that we are in now, there's this talk about diversity on stage kind of as if it's a favor to the marginalized group. Like, okay, you're asking for more representation. Okay, we'll give that to you. Like, isn't that enough, right? But what they're missing is that diversity and inclusivity is actually the thing that is going to build this new coalition of patrons. I feel like this industry for so long has used elitism, i.e., who is kept out, as a selling point, which makes no sense in terms of classism, in terms of race, in terms of bodies. You're only allowed to come in if you can afford it because it's so special, and you need to have a certain education level to even be there and enjoy it. Whereas actually people are going to come to see things because they feel like they're wanted, because they're coming to see themselves on stage, they're coming to see the stories of their lives. They're not going to come even if they start to see more representation, if those stories have nothing to do with them and they feel like they're not really allowed to it's not really about them being there. I don't see that we're going to make the progress that these companies are hoping for.
Yes, Suli?
I think that inclusivity and diversity for diversity's sake, without any action or introspection about the biases and the historically discriminatory practices of the art form, is going to fall flat, right? We see through it. So I'm not, as I do want to see myself represented on stage, but I want to see myself represented because the opera world and the company is doing the work to kind of dismantle things and shake things up and really do the work of making it like actually something that you want to do, and not because you want to sell tickets, not just because you this is the new thing, just like I was talking about before, right? The cycle of what's going on, right? So it's not it's just actually embracing decentering yourself and centering the most marginalized in this art form. When the most marginalized in this art form win, we all win. And that's the work that needs to happen. But it's not just putting it on stage. It's actually like doing actual work within the company. It's actually taking action in every little nook and cranny of what's happening for that.
Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that was just said. And it is so important for people to actually want to do it because they have integrity and because it's the right thing to do and because the talent is so incredible, you know? And also, I'm a voice teacher, and for the past year, that is what I've been primarily doing because, you know, the most theaters are not producing shows because of the pandemic. But also, from a technical standpoint, an opera dying, singing isn't as good as it used to be. It just isn't. And I say that in regards to myself too. I wish I was a better singer also. And I think that's because of the things that people are valuing as far as artistry goes has changed. Also, it's because you have this like culture of bear hunks and people going to the gym and their body like so teaching people how to sing. When I work with people who do musical theater, I have a few students who've been on Broadway. That kind of singing lends itself to maybe having like, if you're like going to the gym all the time, you can get away with it just because of the way the body functions. For opera, having a body that's tight and muscular and all this stuff is bad for support. It makes your support tight. It makes air release tight, and therefore you get less resonance. So you're having people muscling out their voices, thinking that they should be going to the gym because that's what people want of them, and thinking, oh, now I'm going to be a star. But the singing suffers too. On top of everything else we're talking about, the actual art of singing opera suffers. But here's the thing: there are ways to, if you're someone who's really passionate about going to the gym, if that's something that's really important to you, there are ways to learn how to sing and do that. But no one's talking about that. No one's like, okay, you go to the gym. I mean, I am, but no, but it's not a real conversation people are having. Like, you know, you can go to the gym, you can do that, you can value these things, but let's talk about how you then sing while you're doing these things. But people valuing their Instagrams and like how they look in their shirtless pictures and like they're running marathons and making that like the story that people are publishing about them in newspapers and not, oh, I am an artist who works on my craft. This is interesting to me. And valuing all the wrong things also affects the art form and makes people not care. Because guess what? You can do amazing sets, you have amazing costumes and all this stuff, and everything could look great. If you can't hear people, if they don't sound good, people go, well, why am I here? You know? So that's that like is so basic to the art form, and it's so devalued right now. It's just crazy to me.
Right. Well, how do each of you personally cope with the pressure to be thin within the industry? And do you see change happening because of your activism? And what does that look like?
I can go. I spent a lot of my life trying to fit into a space that wasn't intended for me in opera. And it was trying to be thin, how I styled my hair, whether I left my hair curly or not, how I did my makeup, what did I wear, did I look to this, did I look to that? It didn't do anything for me but make me really confused and not know who and kind of get away from myself, who Zuly actually is. And the more that I've kind of said, you know what, F it. I mean, I'm not going to lose 150 pounds in one day and I have an audition. It's just not going to happen. You know, this is what I look like. This is it. So once I was just like, okay, this is it. This is what I look like. And I really, and you know, Tracy knows this. Like, I really like the work that she does. Really, kind of started getting me there to just love all of me as it is and be so grateful for my body and how much it's been through and how it still carries me through every day, and just kind of I love myself as I am and go in there and just be myself and really lean into who I am. I've been getting more stuff. So it's the authenticity of being myself that has gotten me more than when I was trying to be something that I'm not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I relate to all of that. When you ask the question of, how do you cope with this issue, being in the industry? Well, I used to cope with my eating disorder. I used to cope with all kinds of strategies, just to kind of make it through a day where I knew that I was like, when you go into a coaching and you're just waiting for the moment when they're going to say something about how your body is a problem. And so I had all kinds of coping strategies for that. And there was a breaking point for me because I've lost and regained so much weight in my life in that classic chronic weight dissatisfaction or yo-yo dieting, that I realized so much of this language was being couched in healthism. So talking to me as if they just wanted me to be healthy. They just wanted me to be able to do whatever a director asked me to do physically. But really what was happening is that my health was, my ability to meet health markers was getting lower and lower every time I went through that cycle. And that these people, while well-intentioned, were actually harming my health. So the best thing I ever did was find fat community and the political education around these issues to understand that my body's actually good, and it's so good that I'm gonna not punish it in order to be a part of any art form, even if I care about it as much as I do.
I just have not, like, I have yo-yo dieted and stuff, but usually that was like peer pressure and not because of the industry. I don't know. There's always been something in me where I've just been like, whatever. I'm just gonna keep singing and hopefully you'll think I'm good enough. But but I know that not everyone is like that. But one thing that I'm thinking about as I'm listening to the ladies talk, and like just going back to something Tracy said earlier about administrators reaching out to her and everything. As we're talking about this, these administrators should be reaching out to Tracy and going, not asking them, how can we deal with this? They should be saying, wow, you're an incredible person, and we look at your experience and your credentials and everything. We should want to set up an audition. We want to hear you again. Like that's the type of conversation that should be happening, and not like because I just think that the people should be reaching out to fat artists and saying, you know what, we were wrong. Come sing for us again. Like we want to hire you. And sorry, that was just something that I wanted to say earlier. And now I forgot what the question was.
How do you personally cope with the thin culture?
Yeah, like I said, I just don't, and I don't have it affect me. I can get angry about it sometimes. Oh, and this is what I wanted to say. I think it's really important. This is something I'm talking about a lot. Just whenever Tracy and I will do a talk like this, or just talking to other people about it, it's really important for your fellow fat people to be a safe space for each other. And that's something that Tracy and I were for each other. For example, when we were at LA Opera, we weren't as sort of liberated, as Tracy will say, as we are now, but creating safe spaces for each other and not competing with each other or making each other feel bad, or like being like, well, they said I'm going to lose weight and I went to the gym today. Did you, that kind of stuff, because that does happen. So I think we need to create a safe space for each other, which is not that hard. We can do it.
And there's also, although I don't have this perspective, but I know that it's also on the other end with people who are just naturally smaller in body, being told they need to gain weight, that they're too small for the.
Say that I that's something I see a lot of people commenting whenever Tracy will post something or I post something. I don't see that. I'm sorry if it happens, but I don't like. I just think that that is sort of just like people wanting to be included in the conversation too.
Okay,
Um,
that's fair.
maybe that's harsh, but like I don't hear my fellow singers who are smaller bodied saying they told me I have to gain weight or I'm not going to get cast as Tosca. I just don't hear that, you know.
Okay.
If someone has experienced that in this room, I apologize if I'm being insensitive, but I have never once heard that ever. And now I'm going to shut up.
Suli?
I just wanted to add, like, imagine the kinds of things that we're talking about and the kind of hostile environment it makes, and then trying to make art in that. Like the amount of stress that the amount of constant stress that it brings to your body, the amount of which eventually could bring, your cortisol is up to here, then you get adrenal fatigue, and then you're still chastised for not being good enough, right? So it's like you guys are creating the conditions that are not allowing us to like be the full artistic potential that we actually have by creating this hostile environment. This is not helpful in so many ways and so many levels, and that's something that I've been thinking about a lot um, in my own experience going to my university and stuff. It's like, of course I was this or that. It's just the environment just didn't allow for me to actually blossom in the way that I know that I was capable of, because there was just you're getting bombarded left and right, either microaggressively or just directly. So that's the one thing I want to say. I wanted to say something else, but I totally forgot.
Well, I wanted to point out, I have a question from someone in the chat that just sent it directly to me that I want to ask here in a second. But I will say, Amber Daniels said perhaps in the sense of asking baritones to bulk up and get biceps bigger, not necessarily, but I know I have a student who was recently rejected from not even the greatest program in the country, and he's places top 15 in national Nats. And they told him, you're really small, you need to go to the gym, because he is a smaller man for a baritone. So I think it kind of like happens here, there, and, in different levels. But here is a question from someone who wants to ask this. How have you dealt with fat shaming / body shaming when interacting with gatekeepers, such as in an audition or a rehearsal or that sort of thing?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, do you want to go? You go.
I just wanted to add a couple things to the questions we were just talking about, and then also point out that Matt and I have worked on the idea of building a script for that very situation, so maybe Matt can speak to that. But first, what Zuly was just talking about is this stress that we're experiencing in the room. So there is so much research on the tangible negative health impact when it comes to racial discrimination, how it stigma and discrimination on a racial basis increases cortisol, increases inflammation, increases your risk for heart disease and a number of diseases and illnesses. And the research shows the same thing around weight discrimination and weight stigma. And so certainly like that intersectional impact, how could anyone possibly actually create art, as you said, Zuly, in the room where the number one thing you need is courage and freedom and the feeling of safety to have both of those things. So like your access point is completely different than someone who feels safe in the room. And then secondly, this has come up in the chat, and this kind of came up with that previous question around, people in smaller bodies also feeling shamed for their bodies. So we want to just be really clear about how we're talking about these things, because absolutely someone in a smaller body can be shamed for their weight or their body. Somebody could be shamed for their body for all number of reasons, because again, the dynamics in this industry are constantly enabling the gatekeepers to feel like they can tell somebody what's quote unquote wrong with their body in order to help them succeed, right? But we need to be really clear that when we're talking about fat shaming and weight stigma and fat phobia, that's not just a matter of that isolated incident of shaming that you're experiencing that is occurring on a systemic level. So let's say access to a production that is a remount where there's only specific costumes with specific, sample sizes. That's an obstacle. That's a barrier for you as a fat person if they're simply not going to cast you because they're not budgeting for accessibility at the costume shop. So that's there you go. You're out there. It doesn't matter how you sing if they're unwilling to costume you. We're talking about systemic issues like access to healthcare, access to mental health, access to plane seating, infrastructure. Like we really can't get bogged down in I have experienced shame. That is valid, that's legitimate. But you have not experienced systemic barriers to employment, etc.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really important distinction. Absolutely.
Matthew, did you want to share some of that script that you and Tracy have worked on and how you would handle that happening with a gatekeeper?
I don't have it in front of me. I mean, I know she and I did a talk. Was it last summer or it was last spring? It was almost
we called it body justice training. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't have the script in front of me, but I think the important thing to stress about it is that there are ways to talk to people that are because here's the thing: you don't want to just go into someone and say your body there are ways to not be then face the consequences of you protecting yourself, which is a real thing. And it's really terrible. So I think having a script is really important. I think that maybe we should find a way to maybe share it or maybe I know Tracy talks about these things on her Instagram all the time. And having statements prepared to say to people, when if someone comments on what you're wearing, if someone comment just anything in rehearsal, to have something prepared so you're not caught off guard. Because something that I've heard Tracy talk about, and it's something that I've experienced too, is when those things happen, you freeze up and you don't know what to do. And I know that in those situations, I have just been like, oh yeah, you're right. I just because I didn't know what to do. And then, in the moment, it's like, okay, I let that happen, whatever. But it's cumulative and these things build up. And eventually, for me, something that I struggle with is stage fright. And why is that? Because I've experienced all sorts of comments and things said to me over the years where I've let it go or didn't stand up for myself, or just because of the amount of the comments, it's impossible. Even if I had stood up for myself, would I be able to combat my stage fright? I don't know. But I think it's really important to have these things prepared so that you're just going to feel better if you do. And I know it's something that I'm thinking about a lot as we could get back into theaters possibly reopening. What are the things I'm going to say to people when they talk to me that way about multiple things? For me, I experience fat phobia, but I also experience a lot of homophobia, which is crazy because a lot of the time it's from other homosexuals. So it's tricky that way. But I think having a script prepared is very important. And I would say, if you don't already follow Tracy, I know I'm like, yay, Tracy the whole time, but I mean, she provides so much free stuff basically on her account that is really important and will really help give you a dialogue and a script to prepare for when you do re-enter the workplace.
As does Zuly, as do Matt. All three of us are providing resources on this topic. And I really want, when Matt just talked about this freeze response he had in the room, if I may, that's a trauma response. That is a coping mechanism in the room to get through it. And so just being able to draw the boundary for yourself in advance, what am I willing to accept? What am I not willing to accept? How do I want to respond to it in the moment? It's going to help you.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm going to add something real quick to this conversation. I know I'm always going there, but for a long time, in order for me to feel like I can have a boundary, I was always afraid of the repercussions that I would face for setting that boundary. Because I, again, as a fat Black woman, I'm not supposed to make a fuss, right? I don't have the privilege of making a fuss. And that's how it's always been presented to someone, like, at least for me, right? And I had to make a conscious choice to very be open and speak about my experiences and kind of think, okay, how is this going to affect me? Um, okay, if I don't get these jobs, it is what it is, but I'd rather speak my truth and live authentically and and kind of better the business in a more collective way than what it is for me. And that's why I'm speaking about these things now, because this has been my whole life. I
Hmm.
mean, my whole life. So there's always that.
So I'm glad, Tracy, that you brought up costuming. Would you guys speak to the issue of costuming and how we can advocate for ourselves during that process?
Yeah, I think honestly, it we can talk about it in a number of different ways. I think first, it's really important to understand that the costume shop only has the resources that it's been allocated. So if the producers uh, don't think about inclusivity in a real way, they are not giving the appropriate resources to the costume shop. So, for instance, my experience at the Met's costume shop has always been absolutely lovely. They're there ready to buy the bra, the specific bra that I like. They're there to give me every kind of foundation garment that I want, or if I don't want it, they won't make me wear it. But they have a lot of resources in order to accommodate me in that way. I've had much more kind of, I don't know, harmful kind of experiences in really small productions where it's one lady trying with $500 to make everybody not look awful. And, she may not have experienced costuming a body like mine, and she may not have an understanding of how it does me harm to stigmatize me around that. So, yeah, I don't know what you guys want.
I've been lucky. I've had really good experiences with costuming in the US. I want to shout out Jonathan Nipsher, who costumed me a bunch of times and got me amazing foundation garments. And he even got me a corset made at the Met because that's where he knew people there and it was made for me. And he made me feel beautiful every time. And that was awesome. So I was really happy. And also hair and makeup people I've had really good experiences with, and they matched my face really well. That was great. I had a little trouble in Italy, um, because they see me, and I wanted to talk about this before, but they see me as a fat woman, and my specific body shape, which isn't like an hourglass. It's more how I carry my weight in my midsection. That's something else that can be talked about, right? How hourglass fat people are more acceptable and with women versus like someone like me who carries her weight in her midsection. So they just put me in a tent as a high priestess. They basically put me in a giant big tent, and I was like, "Can I?" And I tried to advocate myself because I do speak Italian, and I was like, "Can I get a little belt or just something, just a little, a little zhuzh right here?" They're like, "No, the high priestess is she's supposed to be so, whatever." I don't know even know what they said, right? But then the high priest, he had a belt, so I was like,
Excuse me.
"Hello, can I just get a sash or a belt or something?" I am not a tent. But that's how they viewed me. They just wanted to hide the whole thing. You know what I mean? Like, that's how it felt. So, and I did try my best, but at that point, I was just like, tent it will be, I guess.
Matt and I always joke about going into a fitting and how often, like, we call this experience, like, they'll put a garbage bag on you and then try to take it in. Like, just take in the garbage bag. Great.
Y'all, it's like, I
Yeah.
am, it's just, ugh.
Yeah. Or it's like, oh God, I don't know what to do with this. I'll just make them look terrible. like I'll make them look like just monstrous, and that'll work. I feel like that's what people are always doing to me. But I don't know about you ladies, but I feel like I feel like I've had this happen so many times, especially for smaller productions, where it's like, do you have something at home that you could bring in? And then it's ruined and destroyed, and like I've lost so many things from people asking me to like bring something of my own in that then I wear in the production and just from wear and tear, it's just destroyed or lost or something. So I don't do that anymore. But I think it's really important. It's something that I've gotten better at doing over the years, is speaking up respectfully for yourself in a costume fitting, even at a small place. Because, and of course, I was just thinking as people were talking, I remember I auditioned for this Gilbert and Sullivan company, and the guy said to me in my audition, like, your audition was so great, we just don't have any costumes for you. And I was like, it was just really wild to me that someone said that to me in my audition. But I think being able to like have conversations with the designers in a respectful way, because I've been like, you know what, you can always frame it like, well, I normally have it this way, or like, you know, I feel like I'd feel like more comfortable if the jacket was like a little this way or something. And there are ways to talk to people, because at the end of the day, you have to feel comfortable in what you're wearing on stage. Or I know if I don't, I feel self-conscious. But I think not being scared to have conversations that are respectful, because of course there are sometimes budgetary limitations and all this stuff, or offering solutions. I know sometimes I've been like, well, the last place I went, they did this and it was cheap, and I offer suggestions myself. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't have to do that? But I think having conversations with people, I know I used to sort of be like, oh, well, okay, I should just trust them, they're the costume designer, like I don't want to say anything. But I think there are ways to have these conversations that are respectful and also protect you and make you feel awesome on stage in the end.
Yeah, can any of you speak on what you've heard about opera and fat phobia in non-US houses or competitions? Suli?
Hi. Yes, I lived there in Germany for 4 years, and they're very fat phobic in Europe. Extremely. Much more in a much less tactful way than in the US. And every time, and it just kind of, it kind of boggles my mind a little bit every time I hear people like, oh, I'm just gonna go to Germany and sing. And I'm like, it's not what you think, boo. It's really not. Like, it's not what you think. And it's almost as if there's like a concept that there's just like no good singers in Europe. There are amazing singers in Europe. It's fiercely competitive as well too. And on top of that, like, there's just, I think the fat phobia is even more so than it is in the US, honestly, because there's more body different types of bodies in overall in the US than there are in at least in Germany where I was living in Munich. And so, like, I would go to an audition and literally they would tell me, well, you have a very particular look. I'm like, okay. And we're just worried that, you're not gonna be able to do what the Reggie wants you to do and move the way that. And I was like, are you telling me I'm too fat to sing? Like, what are you doing? And the guy's like, no, I'm not saying that. I'm like, it sounds like you're saying that. So what are you saying? And so I used to kind of combat that by putting them on the spot. But but yeah, I think it's, from in my experience, much more fat phobic over there.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The fat phobia is more matter of fact, and just like it in America, I feel like often it's like cruel, like deliberately cruel, or like avoiding, or rather avoidant. In Germany, it's like, oh, well, you're fat, so it's this is just the way it is. Like it's there's no sort of pretense about it, and you're just like, okay, great. The one thing I will say about Germany that is that because there's so many houses, and they're doing so many different kinds of repertoire, that if you are someone who is not like what you might consider the ideal, I think there are opportunities, but not for women as much, and not for sopranos specifically.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you are a mezzo, or a bass, or even like a character tenor or something, I actually think that one thing I noticed in Germany is I actually think because they're not hiring young artists in these supporting roles and character roles like they do in America, there is actually a lot of body diversity, but not as much for women and not as much for sopranos specifically, which is just infuriating. But so it's this tricky thing where it's like I found myself being like, wow, I'm in a show where everyone is fat or older. Like, there are so many more singers in their 50s and 60s who still sing. But when I think about it, like, there was still this very clear discrimination. But of course, a soprano on the show was a thin woman, you know. So it's tricky because you do see good things about that, but then there's all these people who are being discriminated against and excluded from being in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say that it's only fat phobia for me, you know. I can't say that it's only because I'm fat, because I was flat out told don't ever offer Wagner, and it's not that I can't sing it, and it's not that, it's just that they're like, no, you can't sing it. It's because of my, black, so they didn't want to hear my Wagner. So I like I said, I live in these intersections, and so I get to, you know, double the fun for me.
Well, how would you guys advise young singers to respond when they find themselves in an uncomfortable conversation or situation where an opera authority figure publicly addresses their weight?
Well, I think that, first of all, the kind of youngest generation of singers right now who are just kind of, they're emerging, into the professional world or into young artist programs, I admire them so much because they are the reason why this conversation is shifting around so many issues of equity. Because there's just this kind of generational sentiment of like, no, like you're not going to treat me like that, which is new. It's new. I can't emphasize that enough. 10 years ago when Matt and I were starting in our gap together, there was absolutely like this performative, everybody's on a diet, or at least like trying to show that they're trying. Like it's just this agreement. If you are in this, if you are serious as a singer, trying to be a singer, then you should be trying to always shrink yourself, no matter what body you're in. And that agreement amongst singers has started to crack, has started to shift. And honestly, that's why we're having this conversation today, because there's solidarity amongst singers, enough so for this conversation to be centered. So like Matt was saying, and Zuly, like, obviously, depending on your identity, like you are, having to consider a lot of things when you're in the room, about how you're going to be perceived. And I'm not advocating that anyone cut themselves off at the knees by calling people like bigots in the room. I don't think that's going to help you. But I think that especially the younger generation, my advice is to lean into this this idea of power and autonomy, because it's in solidarity together, all of us saying, like, no, this is actually unacceptable in the workplace. Or just the simple thing of like, I have a boundary around my body because of my own personal history with this issue. And I prefer that we like center our work together on my voice or my stage presence or my professional attire, whatever those things you think are relevant.
Yeah, I am just like right now fantasizing about a group of Gen Z young artists in their like choral rehearsal at some young artist program, and some conductor saying something wildly inappropriate, and everyone in the room going, no, no, like every single one of them just like not being willing to do it. And that is just like making me so happy because I could just imagine it. And I think actually younger people are going to teach us something, and they're going to make the people that we have to deal with as performing artists have to challenge themselves and do better. Because I'm really encouraged to see some people stepping up to the plate and talking about this stuff. But I think there are a lot of people of our generation who are a little older than people who are just starting young artist programs who are too scared, and that's how they made it. They like got ahead within the system, and they're not going to do it. and that's discouraging. But I think it's just the reality. Just from some of the anonymous sources Tracy was talking about in her expose, you know, people who could really make a difference, they're not gonna. So I'm really looking forward to these young people stepping up and just not even like making a statement, just like making it normal, not to disrespect people and not to you know have these kind of abusive conversations in a working environment.
Yeah. And another thing I wanted to add to that, if there's a young singer and there's another singer that maybe is a little older, has a little more experience, and they see that this young singer is struggling with somebody saying something, if they can use kind of like their clout to help that singer and be there for them in solidarity, that would be great. If singers that are not fat or that are not marginalized or people of color, if they can use their privilege to make the environment safer, that's really what's going to push things forward, because this is not a problem that fat people or people of color created. So it's not our responsibility to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
It's other people that have the privilege to just do the work and like making things better for us.
And I would even say it's got to start in that lowest level of the academia with the young singers in their training, even if that means creating groups that just say, hey, this is we at this university or this conservatory, this is what we stand for and this is what's unacceptable. And then that group feeling like they have a voice, that's going to start traveling up the pipeline, especially as time goes on. Question from the chat: what's the worst thing that would happen if the artist being abused just walked out of the room, or should we stay and have the conversation?
That's up to the individual.
Yeah, I mean, the worst thing that would happen is you don't get the job, or the job is taken away from you. But being able to name the boundary, I think that is part of the work. Part of my frustration over these past few weeks, as I named at the beginning, is that our trauma isn't actually being acknowledged as something that's legitimate. And I think part of that is because fat phobia is so normalized within our society and accepted as something that helps fat people not be fat, which is, we all agree socially, is the worst thing you could be, right? Mm-hmm. And the other part of it is that for all these years, for all the reasons of having the trauma response in the room, of having your own internalized fat phobia to deal with, we stand in the room and we nod and we say, yes, you're right, or whatever we need to do to kind of cope with being in the room. And so if even once somebody walked out, I think that person stigmatizing a singer for their body would perhaps proceed differently.
Mm-hmm. Do you think fat phobia has become more intense as the art form has become more visual, such as HD filming?
Absolutely. I think that there's this like misguided idea within opera that it has to match up to like TV and movies, instead of like leaning into what makes this art form special, which is like what the human body is doing without amplification, and what happens when that comes together with orchestra, costumes, and the magic that happens in this live performance. If we were to lean into that and tell stories of the communities that these opera houses serve, that's how it's going to actually survive. Not leaning into the status quo at all. Like that's just it's I don't know why I mean, I know why I went there, but you know what I mean? Like to me it just makes much more common sense to lean into what makes this special.
Mm-hmm. Matthew, do you have any advice to offer to students whose teacher gatekeeps what they wear in an audition, such as hiding fat on their stomach or wearing sleeves?
I would say switch teachers. and I know it's hard because sometimes maybe you're with the most sought after teacher at your institution or whatever. But I just think that even if maybe I don't know, because my teacher just never did that. But you know, even if maybe that person is helping you become a better singer, I just think that limits you. And as you know, Tracy and Zuly were talking about through this whole conversation, it impacts your health and your body and makes you not able to do your job as well. So even if maybe they're helping you sound good, maybe they have connections for you, I would just advise them to switch your teacher. Or if you feel like you can have a real conversation with your teacher where you're like, hey, you're my, I mean, don't say this, but I think it's important to remember, but you're my employee. I pay you to teach me how to sing. And as part of your job description, let's talk about this. Your job description is not to tell me what to wear and talk about my health. I just want you to teach me how to sing. And I mean, there's a nicer way to say what I just said and a more respectful way to say it, especially if you're dealing with someone who is, you know, in their later stages of life, who might not be as open to the conversation. But I think that it's important to have that conversation, or leave the teacher. And also, I want to say something about the industry placing importance on the appearance and everything. I think what's so crazy is that movie stars and actors on TV are paid because and sought after because they, for years, I think it's changing a little too as things get more diverse and things change. But for years, it was all about finding these, like, you know, tiny features that look amazing on camera. And that was like a big thing that the people wanted. And what's so crazy about opera is that if you look at all the most amazing singers, they usually have big faces, like, you know, big cheekbones, and they're weird looking in the most beautiful way. And even some of these people today that are maybe thin and stars or whatever, they don't have movie star faces. Sorry. And that's what whenever I'm watching these HD broadcasts with quote unquote gorgeous soprano, whatever, gorgeous tenor, I'm like, yeah, they're still weird looking. And I don't mean that in a mean way. I mean that in a, wow, cool. Like, opera singers are weirdo people who resonate with their bodies and faces and don't use microphones. So I just think it's so ironic that we're looking for these like people with these features. They don't exist. I don't know any opera singers who don't have like big eyes or big cheekbones or big foreheads or something. And it's just so ridiculous to me that that's what we're looking for in an art form that literally, you don't want those things to you know, be a good singer. I mean, it's just crazy to me, and I think it's so silly that and delusional that people, and also that these companies, they're like, well, you have to be HD ready. I'm like, are you doing an HD broadcast? Because I don't think that's in your budget. So people are going to be seeing me from their seats, you know, so chill out. But I just think it's so ridiculous how these companies think that, like, because the Met does HD, that it's the same for them. Like, it's not. Like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and just kind of like finish up for us, Tracy. Someone in the chat asked for feedback on where being an artist is being independent and where it is having to fit with other people's ideas of casting.
I think that's such a good question, because that's kind of the crux of this. You know, when you go through the kind of opera pipeline where you're going through school, you're going through the YAPs, and all of these industry mentors and gatekeepers have all this advice for churning out somebody to be like, oh, I know this soprano and it worked like this for them, so you should also wear 3/4 length sleeves and A-line dresses and pantyhose, you know. This has been, I totally had an epiphany about this, because when I was in my apps, I was wearing jewel tone wrap dresses and pantyhose and teasing my hair right at the crown and just trying to blend in with the curtain. And, you know, I had this realization of like, well, first of all, this has nothing to do with who I am as an aesthetic person, obviously. And second of all, it has nothing to do with me as an artist. And so much of this advice, especially with this kind of farm system that we have for schools, for singers, is to churn out the same kind of voice, the same kind of interpretation, the same kind of audition dress. And I don't know when that has ever made a star, ever, ever, ever. What you have to offer as an artist, what your voice is, what your brain, your interpretive ability is completely unique to you. So anyone who gives you advice to lose that uniqueness, I think is not, that's not the advice that I would listen to. I think that the work that you need to do as a young artist is to really kind of thoughtfully identify what you have to offer to the world of singing and art, and how you can highlight that. how you can really lean into that. Because that's exciting. That's what makes people buy tickets. That's what makes people follow you and root for you, is what you have to offer.
Thanks, guys. I just, on behalf of Opera NexGen, want to thank you for your time, your expertise, and education for us on this topic. In the chat, I just reposted the Venmo of each of our panelists if you would like to donate to them. And thanks for their time today. I'm also going to be including our website, and you can also follow us on social media. This will be posted later because we did record the chat, and I think some people joined us late, or maybe just the time zone thing got a little off. And if you know of anybody that you think would benefit from watching this back later, we would invite you to do that. So any final words from the three of you before we go? We had a great turnout. I think our highest, we had 35 on here in the middle of the chat. And this is our best webinar with Opera NexGen as far as numbers so far. So we really appreciate it. Any final words before we end?
Thank you so much for letting me talk about my experiences. And I really look forward to how this conversation will continue,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
And follow them all on their social media so that you can get all this wonderful information and join, join in this. I don't know if you want to call it a fight or change or activism or however you want to view it. And we can all work together and make the changes necessary. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye-bye.